Hi, this is Ed Cohen in San Diego, California. You're on Global TV Talk Show. This is a teleconference welcoming leaders and insightful people from many places in the world. First off, I want to introduce you to Sandrine Bardot, who's coming to you from Dubai. And it's a wonderful picture you have in the background. Please quickly say hi, Sandrine.
Hi, welcome, and hi from tonight in Dubai, because it's the night for us.
Yeah, right, right. And Lena Rekdal from Stockholm, thank you very much for being on our show. So you and I are going to do a talk show specifically about Sweden on August 31. So welcome to this one here, and your insight is very, very welcome. Angela Lane is in Chicago. Please say hi, Angela.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, so Angela is an executive with a pharmaceutical company. But more so about today, she's the co-author of a book called Fair Talk and about engagement. And Angela, so in a few minutes, I'd like you to address with me the issues of working from home, working from anywhere, and keeping people engaged and getting proper feedback, okay?
Absolutely. Super happy to do that and to talk also about some research that we've done just about where we think this thing will go in terms of people's preferences around working from anywhere.
All right, Mark Nadich, recently retired from AbbVie as VPHR. Mark, thank you for being on our show again. This is many times. Really appreciate you. And
Great
let's say
here.
hello to Stephen Howard, who's with Caliente Leadership Consulting out of Palm Springs, California. He's also an author, a best-selling author. So you have a new book out. I remember seeing Better Decisions, Better Outcomes. What's the new one called?
The new one is How Stress and Anxiety Impacts Decision-Making, Ed, and I don't know anyone in today's world who's not under stress and suffering from some form of anxiety, so it's perfectly timed for today's world.
Yeah, well, this is perfect to have you here. Michael Piker is going to be our lead talker here. Michael and I have never met in person, but we've been best buddies on LinkedIn for a few years. And I think we're introduced by our mutual friend, Rob Cormier, by email or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so your recent background has been, of course, as a spokesperson, but as an expert on rewards, total rewards, at corporate C-level, and also talent mobility, the role of that. And so, Michael, let's go to you now. Work from home, work from anywhere. Of course, we're all doing that right now, but you have some pretty sharp comments and opinions that developed over the years as a result of your experience in different places. Most recently out of Lausanne with PMI. And so you were on a campaign, the company was on a campaign, if I remember us talking about a year ago, about, I guess communications on a tough topic. Why don't you take it from here and tell us about your role there? And let's segue into, am I normal or am I global?
Okay. So probably the conundrum that everybody on the call here is facing, as did I, was we had a 1.2 billion in spend for an expat program policy was probably set in the 1970s. I've run these programs at 6 very large public companies. It's probably things like foreign service premium, things I've never seen in years and years. So the first challenge was to move away from moving people to jobs instead of looking now at moving jobs to people. So in light of work from home, COVID, the recession and nationalism that's going on, we were really looking there and other places about moving, literally people not moving, but bringing the job to the person and bringing more flexibility of, if you will, remote working. Given the cost of assignments, as we all know, given the fact the immigration barriers are getting worse, given the recession, given COVID, frankly speaking, a lot of my peers are talking about this. Air Inc., ECA, the Big Four have been talking about this a lot. So the intent at PMI, I had a remit for all reward, not just mobility. But here we wanted to shift from traditional mobility to looking at managing the workforce in a very nimble way and bringing jobs to people so you can enable virtual assignments to happen.
Yes, and so tell us about your role in your life as a global nomad and how this has channeled some of your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, my dad was at ORC, as was I. I think I've lived in 9 countries over 30 years, many, many years in Asia, LATAM, Europe, recently from the States. As I wrote an article recently, there's probably about 80 million expats in the world. If you add in missionaries, diplomats, military, and NGOs, it's probably 4 times that figure. I guess for me, it was, I derived, usually it happens with people early. You know, for me, it was an early taste that I didn't like, but I ended up loving being an expat. And being a third culture kid, having reverse culture shock many times, going back to America, basically builds more resilience to go out again and again and again. And my gig has been, like, I know Sandrine, you're in the same space that I am. There's a lot of jobs, not a lot of people that do what we do, and the headhunter calls and they say, here, take a gig in Singapore, Tokyo, which I have. And I don't know, maybe I'm like a freelance nomad. So when the gig comes up, I go.
Yeah, that's cool. Mark Nadich, you want to jump in and give us your perspective on what Michael has just said?
Well, I mean, I think the big takeaway that I heard there was this resilience, right? And the capability of people. And I've had the good fortune to work with a lot of people over the years that have moved around many times. And my daughter and son-in-law have moved 5 times in 5 years, and they're now back in the Chicago area. But
So is he still playing soccer?
No, he retired. He's
Okay.
retired after 8 years. So, but he's going to be he's a coach at Northwestern University now. So,
Cool.
but I think this concept is so often, overlooked for people that haven't been in that situation, and the importance of having systems and processes that to help people and support them, because I've seen it go the opposite way in a not so positive way, and Angela can speak to that too.
Yeah, Angela, mute.
Mark makes it sound like I can speak to it because I went and did something terribly wrong on an international assignment. I didn't do that. But I have had a couple of moves. I have to say, not as many as Michael. And I first met you, Ed. I don't know if you recall this, but when we first met, it was because I was speaking at a conference on the topic of what are the skills that people get from international assignments. And I was speaking as an expat, but also as a head of talent about the important role expat assignments play. And I think what is really interesting in the current moment is just what are we learning about what people can learn not only without leaving their country, without leaving their home. And I think there's huge discussion that companies need to have, individuals need to have, the industry needs to have about what we lose and what we gain if there is a fundamental rethinking of does the talent come to the job versus the job go to the talent. So I think we're like living in an amazing moment.
Yeah. Sandrine.
Well, like Mike, I was an expat. So I moved across Europe first. I'm French. I relocated to Italy by chance 3 times. I worked in the UK and then I moved to UAE, went back and forth. I think what's really important as well is when we are hearing conversations today about companies needing to look into their mobility policies and so on in light of the work from home and the work from anywhere, is that people tend to think of more of the work from home model. So staying within the same, and I will generalize it to stay in the same country, not move to another country in order to do the job even more remotely than what they are doing now. And those would probably have a completely different impact. And I was having a conversation in my LinkedIn group today, but I think that would have a completely different impact on global mobility policies, because there are lots of legal aspects, and not just organizational and personal also for the people who choose to do that or who have to do that, but also legal aspects that we have not fully explored yet. So I think there might be a transition period with maybe a model where organizations that are open to work from anywhere will move through freelancing platforms as a first step to keep it legal and nimble, and then maybe learn how to figure out things when they set up in different countries.
Sandrine, how do you pay people who are working from anywhere, working from home? Do you pay them the same way?
So I think so. If you think at the country level and working from home, there are probably two different models. The organizations that are going to be what I will call maybe hybrid, so they enable a few days of remote work and a few days of work in the office. And in that case, I don't think that pay models would change, simply because the person will still have to go to the office at least 2 or 3 days during the week. But for those who enable a full work from home within the same country, they might want to consider regional pay. So if you're living in a high cost area or low cost area, they might adopt some kind of differential. Although you have to consider that they might lose attractivity to compared to other companies that don't do that. And I think nobody really knows what's going to happen. And the work from anywhere, that's a big mystery. I think there are only 2-3 companies that are really doing it, and I'm not exactly sure which kind of model they really use, and if their employees are really employees or mostly contractors and freelancers. So
let's go back to Michael. Michael, would you comment on that, please?
Yeah, I've seen, building on Sandrine's very good point. So different models, she's right, only a couple companies like Shell and Unilever's done HostNet. But basically, Facebook has done regional differentials, to Sandrine's point. I think Steve Brink wrote a really good article recently in World of Work about doing a regional differential for Facebook. Zuckerberg said, he's going to take a haircut off the Bay Area. And if you live, let's say, in Oakland, you may take a haircut. And there are ways to build a differential around that. Or you have a global employment company, but they're really expensive.
Yeah, okay. Steve Howard, from your leadership insight, Better Decisions, Better Outcomes, it's the name of your book, but what do you say about all this?
Well, I'm in agreement with you. They're saying in terms of the expatriate model, but there's another aspect companies are struggling with that I deal with a lot right now, and that's managing remote workforces. So you've got people in Dallas who have staff in India or Thailand or Romania or Mexico City or Venezuela or wherever. And that's another area. And the cultural aspect. Now, I lived in Asia 21 years and then Australia for 12 years. And so I think that's one thing I bring to my clients is that understanding those cultural differences, how to communicate across borders, how to understand that, in Thailand, you need to spend 10 or 15 minutes and talk about family issues and about children and whatever. Where we Americans, we want to get in the meeting and jump right to the point. We got 15 minutes to get this meeting done. And in Thailand, they're going to spend 15, 20 minutes just socializing. Then we'll get around to talking about business. And people have to understand that. And I don't think, quite honestly, Americans are very good at that, partly because most Americans haven't been exposed to that. So that's a secondary issue to what the rest of the panel is discussing.
Lena, let's bring you into this and give us your take on what you've heard so far, and then give us an insight as to what's going on in Stockholm now.
Well, Sweden is the outlier. As you all know, we haven't had much of a lockdown. I'm in lockdown because I have 10 wolves right outside my doors here, but wildlife lockdown. But what we are thinking about is really the employee experience and how individual that is. And some tasks are ideal for working from home, like we do immigration. That's a perfect job to do from home. There are no issues. But coders, for instance, software engineers that we all need, and we all try to get them to come to our countries, and they research shows that they still want to move to another country to do that job. They're not quite as interested in the Facebook model, for instance, with regional pay, that kind of remuneration model. But I think the key is to see what kind of jobs do you have to move, and what kind of jobs where can the job come to you, like you said, Mike. And that is, there's testing that can be done around that, so you can make those kinds of decisions. And the other thing is what individuals need to stay on top of mental health. That has been apparent that this has not been an ideal situation for everyone, and we don't necessarily know who's who. So that's what we are looking at: is what kind of tests can you do to get a dashboard for HR, to support HR to know what to do with their employees and to enhance the experience, and to see where you need a hybrid, like Siemens, for instance, and that they have to go to work 2 or 3 days a week, but they can work from home 2 days a week. And that's forever, or at least a year or two. So there are many ways to slice this by profession, by individual, by country. And just like you said, Sandrine, I think that being in immigration, we really spend a lot of time thinking about compliance. And there will be a great deal of jobs for the governments. So I would love to hear what you, Mike and Angela, are thinking about the compliance bit, and also the employee experience on an individual level.
Okay, Angela?
I might just jump in with a kind of another way of thinking about that employee experience piece, and I'm going to leave the compliance issues to you experts. That is definitely outside my skill set. But recently conducted some research. It's in the process of being published at the moment. Sample of about 500 business leaders, asking them to predict their kind of approach for their organizations post-COVID. And very much in line with some of the conversation we've heard, it's going to be a little bit job dependent. It's going to be a little bit about your business and your business strategy. But definitely something that is on the minds of companies is the learning that this experience has given them. So yes, there's an employee experience piece, but companies are learning, and they're learning quickly. And they're learning things like, have we been doing a lot of unnecessary travel? Have we incurred unnecessary infrastructure costs? Have we had, and I think, Michael's comments at the beginning were important, the cost of the expat programs that businesses have. And in our research, what we were able to correlate was that the faster that businesses learnt these lessons, the more likely they were to believe that their leadership would support more virtual work. The other determinant of where their minds were was what they thought competitors would do. So if I believe my competitor is going to offer this flexibility, then I am going to get there. Not because I'm particularly interested in the employee's experience. In fact, there was an indirect correlation between what they thought employees wanted and what they were prepared to do. Indirect. But what there was a strong positive correlation around is if I think competition is going to do it, and if I've learned a lot about how I can organize my business in a more agile way, I might be very open to this. So we found that fascinating. And you already see some examples from business leaders. I don't know whether you guys heard Barclays CEO recently was quoted as saying, he can see a time when the London city office is a thing of the past. And we all know the expense of real estate in cities like London and the cost implications that flow on to wages and things for people living there. So I don't know. I just think we have to be really open to think about different solutions, solving for those governance issues. But I think the one thing that is going to be super interesting, we're going to have to solve for the issues Stephen's raised. How do we stay aligned, connected? But also the hybrid model is the one I think that companies will find least attractive long term. Because if I have to build an infrastructure and keep it, and I have to give people flexibility to work at home, I may not find that as attractive as one or the other. So I don't know, just some thoughts there coming from some soon to be published research.
Angela, what about the feedback? How are you finding feedback from people working remotely?
I'm sure that Stephen is also going to, be able to jump in on this one. But I would argue that feedback and communication has never been more important. People are learning things that we didn't have to learn before. I hadn't heard of Zoom 6 months ago, but not just that. The processes I relied on are no longer the ones I can use. I need to problem solve in different ways. I need to collaborate in different ways. So I've got to learn a lot. If I'm not getting great guidance, great feedback, if I'm not getting inputs, I'm probably suboptimal in my performance. But also extra attention is needed because normally I had lots of environmental clues. If I was doing a bad job, Ed, you could maybe frown a little bit. I could see that and perhaps course correct. If we're not together and I'm missing some of those cues, I'm missing some of my self-awareness opportunities. So even more challenge. And then I would add the third and final one, and Stephen hit this beautifully. We're under stress and anxiety, so our behaviors are more likely to derail now than ever before. If somebody's not giving me feedback to help me course correct, I'm at risk of poorer performance because I'm not getting feedback on the skills I need and more derailing behaviors. So lots and lots of communication, definitely.
Yeah. Michael Piker.
Yeah, I guess really, really, really good points, by the way. I might add, and I'm sure you would agree, is mental health and well-being has become even more paramount. We had a big issue around burnout when work from home at PMI, and our benefit spend rate spiked because people were mentally challenged, to be blunt. With regard to compliance, and Sandrine, please chip in. I know you're very versed in this like myself. A couple models. So you can do, obviously, well, the issue is on permanent establishment, right? So if you have people in a place that you don't want to create a tax event, you have to be really careful. Normally companies for like what I call moving jobs to people, they do short-term or frequent business trips. And it ends up being, as I know you know, Ed, a cloaked expat, and it creates a taxable event, which creates immigration and then tax permutations that are extremely costly. So if you do virtual, you have to be careful not to plant and plunk yourself somewhere else too much, because that planting and plunking is going to tax you and nail you from a work permit standpoint.
Yeah. So, Lena, you deal with this all the time, don't you?
We do. We definitely see that that companies are getting more cost conscious, and also like you said, that the hybrid solution short term seems to be an expensive option because you have the employers have full responsibility for the office, full responsibility for the home office. In Sweden, you're legally responsible for not only the well-being, the mental health being with all the employees, but also the workstations, the equipment. We have to check the lights, the way you sit, the having a proper desk, etc. So there's been almost like an emergency move out of things to people so they can work well at home. But there have also been ironing boards instead of a standing desk. So there's been a lot of ingenuity and innovation, and people have handled this extremely well because it was an emergency. And now we're in the sort of the second phase of this, and now the employers have to step up. And now we're not just talking about a virus. Now we're talking about all the other factors that makes a person healthy, and how to maintain daily rituals, how to maintain a healthy balance and be productive. We still have to perform. And so we have had motivational series with a holistic coach every Monday, and we've been covering motivation, self-leadership, focus, how to take care of yourself, eating for energy, and so on. And it's been going really, really well, and it's definitely been needed.
So I want to go to Stephen, and then we're going to take a quick break. I want to show you a couple of interesting videos. They're commercials, but it's really right on the same topic that we're talking about. And again, they're sponsors, of course, but I want to work it into the conversation about how video can be used in a remote work, communication, because a lot of the workers are young and they dig video. They know all about it. And I'm an old guy and I have to learn all this. So, Stephen Howard, better decisions, better outcomes. I mean, your specialty is a frazzled CEO or frazzled leader, and they're making lousy decisions and hurting people and hurting the company, correct?
Yes, it is, and going back to what Angela said, and partly what Lena's referred to there is the people I'm coaching right now is I'm telling them, look, when you get on a phone call with somebody, ask them what are they doing for exercise. I mean, one of the problems, one of the unfortunate side effects of the lockdowns is going to be the mental health issue from a societal basis. I mean, we were already seeing projections of a 67% increase in Alzheimer's and dementia in the United States in this decade before, and this is before the pandemic. That those numbers are only going to go up. And we're seeing already reports of binge eating, alcohol abuse, spousal or domestic abuse. And this is what leaders need to be aware of. You need to be concerned about your employee and finding out what's happening in their home environment if they're working from home. And some countries, I guess, like in Sweden, you have more of the corporation has more of a responsibility or liability for that. In other countries like the U.S., it's a little less so. But from a humanitarian standpoint, I think all leaders need to be thinking about the mental health and the physical health of their employees the longer that they're locked down. So that's a key issue right now.
Angela, would you comment on the mental health aspect and how it relates to engagement, feedback?
Yeah, there's so much in what Stephen said, and I think it's still unknown because the longer this drags, and I think what we even thought 4 weeks ago and what we think today is really very different. But the comments on mental health and how leaders engage with people, how they talk to them about their health, how they talk to them about wellness holistically, has another really interesting dimension that I think we're going to have to grapple with as leaders. When this virus started, the hashtag emerged, hashtag all in this together. And there was something very leveling about the fact that whether it was your boss or whether it was you, the level playing field, we were in it together. That broke down a lot of barriers. So the crisis has the potential to actually bring people close together if we can solve for the wellness and mental health issues and some of those psychological effects. So we got to find out how to find the silver lining in this otherwise, really dark cloud, because there are some potential psychological upsides, because things like the hierarchy have never been challenged more than they've been in this crisis. And I share some examples, but you can find them all over LinkedIn. You can find them all over the internet. The boss is there and his wife walks through, or the dog starts to bark, and the stuff that only normally happens to dumb people like me is happening to everybody, and we're all a little more human for it. So if we can protect the wellness and make sure that stress and anxiety are managed, there is the potential for us all to emerge having built different sorts of more human relationships with one another. A real thing to watch is what happens if you then ask people who have had that less hierarchical experience to go back to a traditional office. That's going to be a psychological black flip that's going to cause a different sort of mental health challenge in the future.
Yeah, Mark Nadich, would you comment on that, please?
So one of the things that I have the opportunity to do is work with people that have lost their jobs. So looking at it from a slightly different perspective, and it's been really amazing how much time I get to spend not talking about the job search and really helping them kind of just work through, which anytime someone loses a job, there's a lot of other kind of stressors, but I've seen over the last 6 months, it's just amazing how big, and many of them, in fact, most of them talk about their own mental illness struggles once you build some kind of connection to that. And I really am concerned about how are we going to manage this, in a bigger way. And it's a significant challenge that we have. And it's not only inside the company, but it's those people that are outside the company too.
So when we come back in just like 2 minutes, I want to go back to Lena and Sandrine and Michael, everybody, and including the people who are silent in the background. We have several. We certainly welcome you to use the interactive chat for any of us or individually. Please feel free to use that chat. Paul, are you ready to roll it?
As an expat moving to the USA, relocating is exciting, but it can also be stressful. Getting a car, truck, or SUV for personal transportation is usually a high priority. That's where International Auto Source comes in. We make getting the vehicle you want for your work assignment or academic program easy, so you're ready to drive when you arrive. Our product specialists have helped over 50,000 expatriates with their personal transportation needs, making us the largest international auto retailer in the world. International Auto Source gives you flexible payment options to buy, lease, or rent a vehicle from the world's leading auto brands, arrange financing on a purchase or lease without a U.S. credit history, social security number, or driving record, get full insurance coverage, and get approved easily through our low-rate factory-backed financing programs. And because we're an authorized distributor of the world's leading automotive brands, our no-haggle prices are competitive, and the buying experience is hassle-free. We'll even guarantee your new vehicle will be ready the day you arrive. With over 20 years of experience in the global community, we are the vehicle experts for expats. We are International Auto Source.
Hello there. Are you going global? If so, it makes sense to obtain insurance that will cover you and your family members globally. Expat Financial is an independent international brokerage that offers international health insurance, expatriate life and disability insurance, as well as travel insurance plans to both individual expatriates and expatriate employers. Expat Financial connects clients around the world with well-known and respected insurance service providers while providing excellent client support and service. Individual expats can also obtain a quote and apply for international health insurance coverage via expatfinancial.com. Expat Financial, a division of TFG Global Insurance Solutions Ltd, can also source special risk coverage for employees working in high-risk countries. Please contact Expat Financial today to discuss your global insurance needs. Remember, Expat Financial is your go-to expatriate insurance specialist. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.
So thank you for your kind attention while I show those. So we wanted to not be shy saying that this is how we get paid these days, is by selling ad space. And so I've been fortunate to find a few, and we've got a couple of more ready to go into the fall. So we're going to be doing about 100 broadcasts between now and the end of January. And we're focusing in on Africa, Sweden, UK, Italy, Croatia, Brazil, Panama. Canada is going to be a broadcast on Thursday, tomorrow. Wow. We call it Canada Bound. And then I also want to very briefly say that on August 19, we're having a follow-up broadcast with the World Bank out of Washington, D.C. Very fortunate to have as my exclusive guest a senior manager from their family network. It's called World Bank Family Network, part of the World Bank Group. And so she's in Washington, and she takes care of the employees and their family needs, particularly at this time.
We've lost you, Ed.
Ed, we lost your voice.
Oh, I go back to Walmart.
Oh, you're back.
Good. How's that? Better?
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay, so anyway, World Bank on August 19. I'll let everybody know. Now, before we get to the end of the show in about 15 minutes or so, I wanted to make sure that if it's okay or not, just let me know. Send me a private message. I can connect all of you in a follow-up email so you can talk amongst yourselves at another time. And I certainly welcome you to come back, either to come back on a show like this or do a one-on-one for 15 minutes on a specific topic. We have a blessing of access to a lot of corporate, current practicing people, as well as recent retirees. And we're striving to get the Generation Z involved. And the video idea is obviously the way to go. I will be having a show, just so you know, with TikTok. They're in the news these days, but they're not ready. My contact was just hired 3 days ago to take over immigration and mobility, U.S.-wide and maybe international. And she's based here in Southern California, and she has spoken at my meetings in the past when she was previously employed. She doesn't want me to mention that right now. But so she says, contact me. I don't even know who my boss is going to be. Not going to be Microsoft or President Trump or what? I don't know. So it's really interesting. Michael, back to you on the global nomad idea. It can be a very exciting life, right? I mean, not that you're getting rich doing expat assignments, but you are getting rich mentally and meeting a lot of people and learning about yourself in a new environment. So what else can you share with us about being a global nomad?
You can be rich, but also, well, it has a down and dampening side too. I guess on the positive side of the ledger, yeah, I mean, it's languages. For me, Japan, I lived there 3 separate times for 6 years. I lived in Asia for many, many years. Probably, I call expat heavy and expat light countries. Japan, China were really tough. Singapore was easy. Brazil was hard. So my point is that you find more about yourself than you ever will realize. It humbles you. It makes you incredibly empathetic to take yourself out of your Americanness and put yourself and plunk yourself into another mindset. Like the gentleman said, if you're in Thailand, you spend 15 minutes, you do the same in Tokyo, you spend 30 minutes studying your business card. Then these days I'm rotating between Switzerland and Netherlands. The Netherlands are, they're blunt as hell. They will tell you if they hate you. They don't bullshit. Whereas the Swiss are probably the most, I've lived there twice. They very opaque, very obsequious, very interesting, but very tough to discern. So I guess I get out of it is, I don't know where my home is. I don't know where I want to retire, but it's probably grounded me more than living in America, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, I envy you, frankly. Mark, you want to comment on that and your global experience?
Well, these people here are the experts, but I would just say that having worked with so many people that have moved 8, 9, 10 times, there is this richness that people gain from that experience that if you were living in, your hometown and grew up in, you would never get. And having worked with so many people around the world, I think that this diversity of perspective and thought is really a driver of business success. And so when you have people that you want to work with, I had the good fortune to work with Angela and lots of other fantastic people, you get to better outcomes because of the diversity of that experience rather than this kind of groupthink process.
Yeah. Sandrine, about you just spoke at a couple of different events, right? Just yesterday, I believe, or the day before?
Yeah, so actually this morning I spoke at an HR conference targeting the Indian market, and on Saturday for an association of HR professionals in Nepal. And I have Namibia planned for in 2 or 3 weeks' time. So, and I have to say it's quite interesting because I really believe that before the pandemic, maybe those opportunities would not have been so easily available. I think people nowadays are more open to reach out. So I'm a blogger. People find me often through my blog or sharing my posts on LinkedIn. And now they're not so shy to say, hey, could we talk about, having you on our podcast, on the video series or whatever, which maybe was not happening as much in the past. But I wanted to maybe make a point about being grounded and moving a lot. I think personally, I understand the need to bring the job to people, but I also believe that having been an expat myself and having worked out of France to manage regions, big parts of the world like Middle East and Africa or Europe, Middle East and Africa, or international, which in fiat meant the whole world except US and Canada, I don't believe that we have the same quality of understanding the challenges that are taking place in the different countries if we don't travel as much, but also if we don't live there, because there are lots of things. If I look back to the first time I moved to the UAE back into 2007, and I was the global head of performance and reward for this local organization, I realize now that we made some cultural mistakes. My boss was new to the UAE. I was new to the UAE. The head of finance the CFO was new to the UAE, and the CEO was new to the UAE. We all arrived within a span of 3 to 4 months together, okay? And there are a number of things which, if I would face the same situation today, my reaction and my recommendation would be completely different, because I would say, oh, I understand from a cultural point of view. Yes, most of my bosses at the time were coming from Nordic countries. So there was a Swede, there was a German, there was a Dutch, and there was me as a French. And I don't know if I'm North or South. The French are kind of a mix of the two. But we had a much more maybe rational approach to things. And in the Middle East, it's a relational approach to things, which is very important. And there are some clues that we missed. Not that we didn't want to see them, we just were not clued into them. And so I think that even though companies will want to be rationalizing maybe some of their mobility programs, the true multinationals will still need to send some people abroad to get a full sense of what's happening in the field. So I think we're not going to move to a world without expatriate mobility. We'll move to a world with maybe fewer or different types of mobility, but we would still need to have that. And also to grow future leaders that are really ready to be leaders of multinationals. Otherwise, if they've only worked in one single country, doesn't matter if it's US or France or, I don't know, Sweden, for example, they will not be ready for international challenges if they haven't worked themselves abroad. I honestly believe.
I want to jump in here and just another pitch for August 28th. August 28th, I'll be producing one of these programs. I call them a telecon, that is going to have Angie Weinberger, who's based in Zurich, Global People Transitions, and Pierre Geronimo, who owns relocation companies. He's out of Geneva. And Sandrine will be on the program. And also Rohit Manuka, who's, he's coming back.
Okay.
Rohit and Sandrine and I did a talk show about a month ago. Rohit is based in Dubai, and he's HR director for a Coca-Cola franchisee for UAE. And so that's going to be an interesting program, and I'd like to expand it by welcoming everybody to be involved. And then, as I mentioned, August 31, Lena and I are going to be doing a show based on Sweden and other people that we're able to collect. So we always want to have more voices. Everybody gets to speak at our meetings, of course. Michael, I hope you come back.
Yeah,
So,
thanks.
Angela, what's your next book?
Oh, I don't know that I can that I can have another one in me. I think it will depend, but
Sure you
certainly.
can.
Thank you. But at the moment, I think some of these things about, how there are inflection points in people's career, how there are leverage points. And that if people take a particular road, it used to be expats, the road less traveled, it gave you a competitive advantage. Now we're kind of rethinking what are those leverage points for people in terms of development and career. How can you find them, and how can you really take advantage of them? And I'm thinking of Sandrine's comments, and having been an expat, and I wouldn't swap my experiences for the world, but the privilege of moving around the world, and it is a privilege. I truly believe we are privilege when some country opens its doors to us and allows us to work there and experience that. That actually has been restricted to a few people for whom they were able to make mobility work. Maybe their family situation enabled it, but for many of people that's not the case. One of the cool things about the technology and the ability to have conferences like this where we reach out and connect from all around the world, the privilege of dealing with people from other countries, of experiencing those cultural aspects, of having that inclusion Mark referred to, that privilege is now available to more people. And if this trend continues, there's the potential that we could all become better world citizens. And so we would see that that's a leverage point. And so if there's a book, it's around that, but all sorts of other leverage points that make a difference in someone's career.
So it's about reinventing. So I think some of you may know this, but on February 13th, I produced a live meeting in LA, and it was held at Venice Beach, which is not exactly Silicon Valley, although it has become Silicon Valley South, because North cannot relocate people up to the valley. Nobody will go, right? So they brought all the companies down to the beach area. And so we held a meeting in the Hotel Irwin, which is kind of an iconic place right across from Muscle Beach. And so one of my speakers, my luncheon speaker, was a guy who I knew from 20 years ago when he arrived from the UK into LA, and he was working for somebody else. But he has since become a venture capitalist, all right? And he's done really well. So I invited him to come. Of course, I want his money too, but I invited him to come and talk at our lunch to the people who were in our audience, which is not a big group. We had the head of administration and HR from an Indian tribe, and but a really rich one. They have a really profitable casino operation, and they own a ton of land east of LA. So anyway, Catherine came and spoke at our meeting about what it's like to work in an Indian tribe casino, and so she went on and on about that. So the venture capital guy, talked about what it takes to get money and how it's very likely that you're not going to get anything, particularly if it's me. So because I asked, and he says, "We're not giving you any money, Ed. You're going to lose it, and so you may have a good time doing what you're doing, but you're never going to make our points, our levels." So he said, now this is back in February, and so he says, "You don't need venture money. You got to find sponsors, and you got to keep going and improve your quality every day, and you will attract people around you because of who you are and the quality that you do." So anyway, he says, go to Zoom, go to Cisco WebEx, and learn how to do that. And this is before I knew what Zoom was, okay? Just this past February. So it's a matter of reinventing. Now, as we look to the future, Michael, and being a nomad, it becomes a company investment, doesn't it? Assuming that Americans will be able to travel again, but our others can travel and get accepted. It becomes a company investment in that one person and what the ROI is going to be. You know, guys like you and Angela and Mark always thought about, how do you measure ROI on an assignment? Well, it's impossible, right? So now with the new world, the new now, as I call it, Michael, how could an assignment be measured?
Yeah, that's the silver bullet for the 30 years I've been involved. I would say it's the experiential return, both to the company and to the individual. And there's probably the way to measure that is outcome. And there's virtual assignments. Let's say if we did this, you can have some very specific short-term outcomes that can be measured. And for a price point that's probably 1/5 of a traditional expat. So the ROI is already there because it's a lot less input and you get some more output, right? So as opposed to 3x expat and the ROI is nebulous.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that when I was on the board of ERC for 3 years, for example, we with FEM and Eura, we tried to define ROI. And I spoke at Davos about talent mobility, and we still can't rub the nut on what ROI is. Everybody's been looking for nirvana, and we can't define it.
So, Stephen Howard, better decisions?
I agree. I mean, and part of what we talk about as an expat is not just the expat, what they accomplish in 2 or 3 years, hitting their MBOs or something. But when you're an expat, unlike when you fly in and fly out, you develop a network. And that network continues with you throughout your career. I mean, I haven't lived in Asia now for 14 or 15 years. I still put people together. I still have a network in Asia. And that's just so valuable. You can't measure that. I mean, you just don't know what it is. But that network, when people live in a country as an expatriate and then in multiple countries, that network just so I lost track of my word here, but that network just grows exponentially. That's what I was trying to think of. It just grows exponentially. And that's something companies need, smart companies making better decisions will look at that and say, we will benefit long-term from a short-term expatriate assignment.
Yeah. Lena, what do you think about that? Now, your company is now called Nimmersion, right? Immersion with an N in front of it?
Yep. That's exactly it. I actually anticipated that virtual reality would be much, much faster. So I thought we would have virtual tours, area orientations for people waiting for their work permits. We could have everything set up when they came and they would feel like they had been to Sweden. We do virtual home findings since a few years, and now we've been helping others around the globe to set up these programs because of COVID. But the technology, we didn't adopt the technology the way we expected. But we're getting there. And that's one of the silver linings, I think, with COVID, is that we are, just like you are now a Zoom expert just in a few months. We are completely paperless. We have grown a huge network during this time because there's time to talk to people. And so I find that the virtual networks have been much more active, a little bit like you said, Sandrine.
Yeah, Sandrine? Yeah.
I wanted to add maybe one thing in terms of the ROI. I don't know if it's the ROI, but it's at least the follow-up. One of the things where I've seen a lot of I will not say failure, but not so huge success from organizations in managing their international assignees has been the return to the home country. I've managed mobility programs. I've also been in mobility programs. And I think a lot of times companies put a lot of effort to think who they are going to send, where, on what kind of program, and so on. And when the person comes back, There's not really a job for them. The organization does not really make an effort to get them a job. It's more like, I remember even in Microsoft in my time, so we're talking 15 years ago, when you were coming back, you were like told by the mobility team 6 months before, by the way, find yourself a job back in your home country. And most people, and then maybe you had a grace period of 2-3 months after coming back, finding yourself a job, and otherwise you would be out. And how stupid, sorry to say, is that? But
it is stupid.
You are completely losing the investment that you've made in that person, or they find a job which is, they're told, oh yeah, you cannot have a job which is higher grade than when you left because we don't know what you really did when you were abroad. And anyway, you don't have your performance ratings, all these stupid bureaucratic reasons. So I think for me, one of the success factors that I would identify for a mobility program would be how many people returning to the home country are still here 1 year after they're returning and haven't moved to another company that is super happy to have somebody who has expat experience without having to fork out 3 times their salary for 3 years, that they got the money and they just give them 15% salary more. So that's a super ROI, but for the competition, actually, I think. So I think we need to also think about that as HR professionals, that we consider the end-to-end process.
So as we come to a close here, Angela, thank you very much for being on the program. So you're from Australia originally?
I am. I'm going to connect with Stephen later and find out where he lived while he was there.
G'day, mate.
G'day. How are you?
Yeah, and you and I first met in the New York area, I believe, or somewhere. But when you're an executive with Avon, and that was the first time you spoke at our meeting. I think it was in that hotel next door to the United Nations building, but I don't remember right now. Getting older and not remembering everything.
Me too.
So at your pharmaceutical company, you've been on a wild ride there, and not only from the successful products, but with your acquisitions now. So is it still a decentralized operation, or do you have all that work to do?
Oh, well, I have a lot of work to do. The acquisition you're referring to just was completed in May of this year. So there's still a lot of work. And, you know, with all of these things for many months, systems are different, processes are different, policies are different. You're governed in terms of integration by the contracts and deals that we're done. So still a lot to do there. Yeah.
Mark, you introduced me to a young lady by the name of Carrie. Did she find a job yet?
She's still looking, but she's got some good opportunities.
Yeah, good. Well, she'd be welcome to be on one of our talk shows.
Sure.
To give advice to people who are also in between.
That'd be great.
Yeah, and you know, you and her together, we could find others, I'm sure. Yeah, Michael, where do you go from here? I mean, I know you're going to be in Amsterdam, but where do you go from here?
Yeah, probably going back to consulting. This will be my 4th stint back in consulting. But selling in this market now at the billing rates they ask you to bill is hard, but I'll try it.
Yeah, okay. So come on back on the show and use it as a teaching device. Very much welcome you all. Lena, thank you. Nice to meet you in person, quote unquote. And Sandrine, again, thank you. We'll see you soon.
My pleasure. See you soon.
So this has really been exciting for me, and thank you for being our guests here on Global TV. And please do come back again.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
See you again, guys. Bye.
Ciao. Grazie mille. Okay. Thank you all. This is Ed signing off in San Diego.